Hi, everyone, and welcome to Doc's Thoughts. So, I have the privilege today of interviewing Barry Goldstein. And I heard about him mostly. I met his wife at a conference I was at. She's a naturopathic physician. And we were talking about health and all the things health and wellness. And she mentioned that her husband has all of this experience in music for healing. So, I first want to talk about him and who he is, and then we'll get deep into everything that he does because it is absolutely incredible. So Barry is a multi-award winning producer, composer, author, and musician. He's a visionary composer and sound expert, and he works at the intersection of music and healing, which I absolutely love. He has done collaborative work with some really big names, and I am excited to hear you talk about these people. And what I love is he harnesses music for emotional and cognitive wellness. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about your early career and how you got into this, because this isn't how you got started, correct?
No, this is definitely not how I got started. So,
You were
yeah,
you were in New York
absolutely.
City, right?
Yes. hmm
And I meant, so Barry has a book that I read, and I'll share it with you guys in the show notes and reference it throughout the interview. But you said about 1997 you had a big shift in your work, correct?
Yeah. I started out as a music producer in New York City and mostly producing club hip hop. And actually, I co-produced the best rock instrumental of 2005, which got a Grammy
Right.
with Les Paul, the inventor of the electric guitar. So, and that was again for best rock instrumental. So, not the same type of music that I'm doing now. And really, I'll be honest with you, Lynn, this was all an experiment. That I had kind of reached that level that I wanted, and my goal, was to be a professional music producer. But I'm sure a lot of your listeners and maybe yourself can even relate. Sometimes you create a goal, you get there, and it's not exactly what you thought it was going to be, and you have to kind of reevaluate. And I was losing my love for music because I was so wrapped up in timelines and deadlines and having to have this song by this time. And, a 4-minute song was, most people don't know, for a record producer can take 100 hours in the recording studio just to deliver that. So I knew that I was moving out of my love for music and getting caught up in the details of what had to be done. And so I said, what would happen if I kind of reversed my very minute and detailed process of composing music, and I just allowed myself to decompose to music instead? And I did some research online. This was before I wrote my book. Um, and what I found was, and I'm sure you know this, and your audience knows this, that the heart at a relaxed state beats between 60 to 70 beats per minute. I said, well, what would happen if I set my metronome for that tempo and just allowed myself to take these journeys with that? And that's really was the starting point for me. Just would set my, that my recorder for that tempo and let the music come through. And what I found was that I was moving to these very deep meditative states, very relaxed states. And at that time, I didn't know what it was called, but I know now that I was moving into heart coherence and my brain waves were slowing down to alpha or theta brainwave states. And what ended up happening was that I ended up sharing these recordings with other people, although I thought no one was going to be interested in like 1 hour long pieces of music with virtually no melody and, no choruses, like songs had. But to my surprise, people started using them in hospitals and hospices and with their mom who had dementia, to help her get to sleep at night, to deliver children into the world, for cancer patients who were going through chemo, delivering, you know, um, um, babies in during, and after birth, and actually even had doctors in the ER using it to
Uh-huh.
get them into a more centered state. So that is where the experiment started and took me down a whole new path of researching how music could be used beyond art and entertainment as a tool for transformation and healing.
Yeah, and just for my audience sake, you're embedded in the musical world, but so as a producer, what is your role in terms of developing a soundtrack or an album?
Yeah, so I wear a lot of hats, and I'm actually composing and producing music. So it's not always like that for all producers. Producers don't necessarily have to compose the tracks as
Okay.
well, but producers, for the most part, are creating the arrangement and the vision behind the track. Let's put drums in here. Let's put a guitar in here, and also responsible for overseeing the mixing of how you're hearing that. So I kind of wear both hats because I'm composing the music, I'm producing it, and I'm mixing all in actually in this space. You're seeing me in my recording studio.
And then you can do that for another artist who then goes on stage and uses your composition as his art, or you can do your own. A lot of what you're doing is now your own, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I collaborate quite a deal, but yeah, I'm also hired as a producer, and then though artists can then utilize that music on platforms where you see it, like iTunes and Spotify and all of those.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about, so my audience probably doesn't understand the word coherence or heart, like the heart coherence or vibration. Actually, let's talk about vibration first. So you talk in your book about being in a contracted versus expansive state. So tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, actually, let's I think let's back up. I think your instincts are
Coherence?
right. Let's talk about coherence
Okay.
first, because I think it's a segue into talking about vibration. But if we can understand how it works in our physical bodies first, and since you are a doctor, I'll take it from that premise. So I always compare, our bodies to an orchestra, and music isn't just something that happens to us. There's music that's going on in us, our heartbeat, our breaths, our sigh out, our sounds that work within this system. So if you think of our heart as the conductor of what's going on in our physical body, it's sending out the tempo to the other systems. Imagine if those other systems were all part of an orchestra, like your endocrine system, your pulmonary system, your digestive system. If all of those were playing music of some kind, but they all decided that they were going to play whatever they wanted, at whatever tempo they wanted, right? What would that sound like in our physical body? It would probably be dissonant, or it wouldn't have much order to it.
Right.
So the heart, just like I was adapting the tempo to target my heart, the heart is basically the metronome in our physical body. And what the Institute of Heart Math has studied is that when we're in what are called elevated emotions, like kindness, compassion, um, gratitude, that they did actually ECGs of this to show that when we're in those states, our heart is, and our heart rate is in coherent, smooth, orderly rhythm. So exactly kind of what I just did. And there's charts of that you can see if you go to HeartMath, though they're very much in a coherent rhythm. When we're in emotions such as anger, frustration, guilt, shame, that our spectrum of that ECG is quite different. It's showing discoherent or incoherent wavelengths within that rate, that heart rate.
And I
So,
think everyone can understand the difference in how that feels. I don't think people think about that often, but it's a totally different feeling.
yeah, I mean, the easiest thing that you can think about is when you're in a relaxed and more peaceful state, it's going to be more coherent. When you're in stress, anxiety, any of those are
Loaded.
the emotions you're usually going to be connecting to. Like you don't hear many people say, "Wow, I was stressed and in this beautiful, peaceful state." Right there,
Right.
right there, and they engage different, systems in our body. So when we're in those smooth and orderly heart rhythms, it's much easier to get into coherence. And so, how you would see that in benefits as doctors is that you would see that in improve in people in terms of increasing their heart rate variability, which is going to measure the beat-to-beat changes in their hearts, our ability to deal with stresses that come into our lives, and how resilient we can be when those stresses come in. And obviously, it's a prime marker of not just heart health, but a prime marker of health.
Right.
So then the question becomes, okay, well, what does any of this have to do with music, right? We can move into these heart coherent states through these elevated emotions. So there were studies that kind of bridge these two things together, of the metronome and anxiety and all the above. And there was a study that actually showed that two groups, one who listened to a metronome at 66 beats per minute, and the other just sat in silence. And even just listening to that metronome at 66 beats per minute, which is right in between 60 and 70 beats per minute, those subjects had much less anxiety than people who were sitting in silence. So that tempo is really a sweet spot for moving us into these coherent states. Well, you take that, and obviously music has a tempo. We all know that. DJs are constantly looking at beats per minute to see how they want to target specific moods within their audience. So think about that. If you were the DJ of your own life, you can target specific states. So music combines these two things, where your heart entrains to the music. An internal rhythm that's synchronized with an external rhythm is called entrainment. So we can begin to design music around these principles, which is exactly what I did. I began to compose a lot of my meditation music around 60 beats per minute. And what we found by doing this is that people are moving into that parasympathetic state that is more conducive to healing. So when you're in that sympathetic state, you're not going to be in the state of recovering or repair or detoxifying or strengthening the immune system. So music can actually take you into that parasympathetic state where you're able to rest and digest more effectively, and your body is much more able to move into a healing response in the physical level. Anyway.
And we use a lot of things like breath work and cold exposure and different supplements like adaptogens to help people get into that parasympathetic state. But this seems like almost like an easier way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great
work.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. It is easier, and because what gets you to that elevated emotion faster than music, right? And we can't create a defense system for it. Like, if we know we're using other therapies, right? Part of on a mental and emotional level, we can create a subconscious defense mechanism if we're not ready to release, anxiety or trauma. When music has a way of catching us by surprise and working with what I call the four-body system. And, that's not just physical health. When we talk about healing, healing can be releasing a physical block, sure, but also a mental block, an emotional block, or in some cases, even, having a deeper spiritual connection. Mm-hmm. So music addresses those four pieces, which I look at as a whole for health, and it's low cost, it's non-invasive, and I call, what I'm doing acoustaceuticals.
I saw that word. I love that.
Yeah. And, that's really how I want people to look at this is, what would happen if we start to look at music as medicine? And I'm not saying to replace anything that your doctor is prescribing.
Right.
Of course, but, why not try something low cost and non-invasive to see if it's complementary to what you're doing, and maybe it can complement your whatever else that your doctor is utilizing as well.
Absolutely. And you're trying to target a lot of times the alpha and theta waves with your music and the different beats, correct?
It really depends, Lynn, because I target where people want to go. So the biggest questions is I tell people to work with when they're doing this, and it doesn't have to just be relaxing music, and we can talk about that a little bit. But the three biggest questions are, where am I now? Where do I want to go? And what's going to take me there? So I have music that is multi-genre, like a lot of the music I do with Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's utilizes with his live workshops that have over, up to 8,000 people in them.
Mm-hmm.
As well as with Dr. Daniel Amen,
Mm-hmm.
we've moved across genres. So with Dr. Joe, I'm using sometimes music that's very epic, for people who want to connect with their body in a very non-passive way. When you're moving that breath and doing breath work, that relaxing music might not work. So we're using music that has a lot of drums in it and is going to be inspiring and motivating to get people to that state. So it's all about where where you want to go and where you're at. And same thing, a lot of studies show that with people like with mental illness or people who are in psychosis, playing relaxing music for them is not going to be beneficial because their
Right.
brainwaves are moving so fast. They need a bridge to get there from one state to another. So playing relaxing music is not the music that you want to play for someone in psychosis. Preferred music is. So the music they prefer is going to be the music that might relax them. So you see, it's just like, as I'm sure on your end, you don't prescribe the same thing for everyone.
No.
It's individualized medicine is the most powerful medicine that we can prescribe.
It's amazing because going through all this and researching this, I went back and looked at my playlists on Spotify, and I have very specific playlists that I use when I want to get into flow state and do deep work, when I'm preparing for a party, when I'm on a boat day. And I kind of
There
looked
you
at
go.
the music and it makes sense. I think people can naturally choose songs if you're a little bit connected to them. But I think we'll talk later about how people can actually go about building a playlist. And your book has just amazing specific song recommendations to make it pretty easy for people.
Yeah, and I think that kind of segues into the whole, the theory of vibration as well, which was what we started talking about before I said let's do this question first, because I wanted people to understand how it relates to them in their physical body, objectively as well.
Hmm.
This is not a subjective thing.
No,
Working
not at
with
all.
heart coherence, this is something it is synchronizing how music synchronizes with your physical body to create benefit. And so, but we do change vibrationally every day. And I'm sure that you can imagine that your cells are not moving the same way as they did yesterday. And yeah, your emotions do have effect on your physical body as well. And I'm sure a lot of people can understand that, that if something happens in your life that is creating a lot of stress, you might connect that to a digestive issue, or someone might experience diarrhea or constipation,
Hmm.
right, from actually an event. Or they might have an event that creates so much stress for them that they have a headache or a migraine that comes about. So
Or
when we
you
look at that,
like a long-term depression.
right, I was going to say, when you look at that over and over again, right, that if that same stress occurs on a daily basis, is that going to move beyond it just being an emotional, or mental challenge of your day, but the same thing occurs in your body again and again? You feel nauseous the same way you did the day before, and you start to notice that things that happen in your day, which we would, normally call energy, right? A person, place, a thing, situation, or event creates our mood for the day in conjunction with how we respond to that, right? It creates stress or doesn't create stress. So how we spend our energy affects our stress levels. And so that's where music comes in terms of affecting that. And we don't necessarily vibrate the same way we did from one day to another, based on the challenges we have in our day and how that affects our physical body.
And I would
So
say it
again,
changes throughout the day too. I mean, I feel like my vibration status throughout the day is just kind of like this, depending on a bunch of different stuff.
right, exactly. Like if you have a patient that, that, oh my God, that was, I can't believe she's only 10 years old and she has a chronic illness. There are things that come in or that affects us as humans. I hope that they do,
Yes,
for
for
most
sure.
people are affected by that. And, our emotional response affects our physical body. So that's when we can begin to really utilize music, sound, and vibration to create more impact. It's not just art and entertainment, but when we choose to say, wow, I'm not going to let this day snowball into one of those days, right? Right? I'm sure you've had those.
Oh yeah, and I've also had those experiences where I'm driving in the car and a certain song comes on and it's just like pure elation. I think you mentioned the Cat Stevens song. Is it Morning Has Broken, or is that you mentioned that as one of those songs for being uplifting? And we've all had those experiences where we're driving and the song comes on and we may have been in a not so great mood and then all of a sudden everything the heart just opens up.
Right,
I think we've all
exactly. So,
experienced it.
yeah. So and that's random, right? And that's where
Right.
most of us can associate with that. Most of us have had random experiences where music has affected us in a profound and powerful way. And, you read my book. So what I say is, what would happen if this wasn't random? And we decided we wanted to become the DJs of our lives. And just like a DJ, decides what songs she's going to play at a wedding, and they're different songs for different parts of the wedding, from cocktail hour to the first dance where the father is dancing with his daughter, right? And then when you're getting up at the end to dance music, and those are all planned out. They didn't happen randomly.
Mhm.
So the same thing can happen in our day. If we start to look at this, wow, how am I going to program my day? And, for your audience, for people who are watching, who are in the medical field or are very interested in health, I relate this to health. I think I call this musical nutrition.
Mhm.
How are you going to nourish yourself musically throughout your day? And starting with the 3 times a day, just, like you would start with food, like the first meal of your day is breaking the fast of you not having eaten for 8 hours. What do you want to put in your physical body that's going to give you energy? That's how I look at music as well. Okay, so your ears have rested. You haven't heard anything for 8 hours. Right? What's the first song you want to use to break the fast of your hearing that is going to really create the mood of your day? And it's not going to be the same one every day. Like if you
No.
have, a tough morning, you might want to hear something relaxing, or you might want to get up and move at the beginning of your day. So what I suggest to people starting out is, if you start with a 3-song playlist to start your day in gratitude. And again, it doesn't have to be just relaxing songs or peaceful songs. Like my 3-song playlist is Sly and the Family Stone, Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself, Dido, the song Thank You.
Love
And then
that
I
song.
have another album called The Heart Codes that I composed that just really puts me in a state of gratitude.
Mhm.
So that's how I start my day, or I switch it up and play what I call your happy song. So for those people like, oh, I don't have the time to create a 3-song playlist. Well, what's one song that makes you happy, that once you put it on, you can't not be in a good mood?
Mhm.
So what's your song, Lynn? Do you have like a song that?
Ah, it changes all the time. I mean, I usually play like Bon Iver and kind of more mellow music when I'm first waking up because I have this ritual where I like to be in that, I don't know if it's theta. Yeah, the theta. I have no alpha. I like to be in the alpha state when I first wake up for about an hour because I feel like just some really good creative time.
Awesome.
Um, but then usually I've always been the DJ of our family. So since I was in grade school till now, I'm always the person who curates the playlists and senses people's needs and then puts on the next song and delights when they're all dancing and having a good time. But it changes a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of people do, but that's great. Also, I'm just going to rewind on something you said about, when you're waking up, you're usually in that alpha and theta state, and that's great because you can get some great creative things done. And that you're exactly right, and that's usually what I'm suggesting for people as well to amplify your creativity, because we know this even from athletes and flow states and getting to the zone, the state that you're talking about happens normally between alpha and theta brainwaves states. So most of us are in beta, where our brainwaves are moving much faster, and that's great for focus. And you have a lot of things to do, and you have a lot of patience, and you're switching gears. You have to be in beta. But when you want to get those ideas, as like, wow, where did that come from? Or like that automatic state where athletes are just like, hitting 3-pointers, or they're getting strikeouts or whatever. They're moving into this zone. And, when you're waking up in the morning, you're moving out of those very slow brainwave states. And as you awaken, you're moving from delta and through theta and alpha. So that's the perfect time to like stay in bed. Don't just like pick up your phone,
No.
and start reading emails and, move into an automatic, because you're already in beta, right? You wasted all those beautiful alpha and theta brainwaves to
Which
move
are,
into creative states. That's where you
yeah,
get some
they're
great
delicious.
ideas.
My husband
And
actually, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say my husband actually is super respectful because I've told him, hey, I need like an hour if you start talking to me, because usually we're
Right.
talking about events and activities and just normal couple stuff. I'm like, the second you start talking to me, it's over. So just give me like half hour, 45 minutes after you wake up. And he's so respectful, and it's
That's
amazing.
great. And that's
Yeah,
what you have to do. You have to communicate, that this is sacred time. So
right.
when I'm actually releasing a CD with um, HemiSync, which is it's utilizing binaural beats
Mhm.
to actually target specific brainwaves, and it's called Alpha Omega, and it's geared towards exactly what we're talking about: the time when you wake up and the time when you go to sleep. And it's the same thing, when you're going to sleep. Most of us are just firing and wiring still. We're going from either watching TV or going on Facebook or Instagram, whatever it is, or TikTok, and scrolling, which is obviously high beta. And we're trying to get to sleep. And then we wonder why 75 million people in our country alone have some type of sleeping challenge or insomnia.
Mhm.
So, if sleep was meant to bridge into and to be in a much more peaceful and sacred state. And this was a time where, indigenous cultures and, in the ancient times, they used this and as a time to segue into a very, sacred ritual, because sleep was the time where your body got to rest. And it was also the time where you got to move into dream state and to receive messages as well from your elders and people who have passed. And so these are ancient techniques that we've lost. And, it's not just what some would call woo, but these
I
are
know.
things that were used thousands of years ago. And I always have to remind people, and sometimes doctors as well, that, that the Chinese symbol for medicine actually incorporates the same symbol of music within it. And they had a very, very aware about music bringing harmony and integration to our health. So again, these things that were stepping stones for what we're using as modern medicine, they're still very powerful in terms of what our body needs and how we can reconnect, and how sound can be used as medicine, because sound has been used in this way for thousands of years. And we're starting to see that come through, as you read in my book, in studies, which is
And
so
scientific studies,
exciting,
right.
that
And I
there's
think,
research behind this. It's not just ancient folklore.
right. And now we're seeing the actual end result of improved cognition, healthier immune system, obviously better neurological function, um, less chance of chronic diseases. Like these are well documented results that people are seeing when they're able to achieve this better state of balance.
Yeah. And I mean, everything from chanting Om, right? Which people are like, oh my God, that's so woo. right? Om,
Right.
I'm not going to do that. Um, but actually what they found was that in a study, that one group that chanted S, and this is through an fMRI study,
Mm-hmm.
a group that chanted S versus a group that chanted the Om, and the group that chanted S showed absolutely no benefit to the brain at all. But the group who chanted Om, specific areas of the brain that were associated with inner peace lit up. It created limbic deactivation.
Mm-hmm. Which,
And so I shared this study, because I lecture for doctors as well, and I lecture
mhm.
in conferences for CME, so you have to provide studies
Right.
in order to speak there. And, they were wondering what a musician was doing lecturing at a medical conference. And I said, well, I'm an MD as well. I'm a musical director,
Right.
right? So, and when I gave them the study on chanting of Om, I said, would you be willing to join me and see for yourself? And we got 200 doctors upstanding and chanting a chant I created called Om Shalom Home. So, I think people are at that point where, where we're kind of starting to not care as much about what people think.
Yes. Well, and I would say one of the things I was going
So,
to ask you is I think probably earlier in your career you were tagged as New Age, and I
mhm.
think it's probably just fully mainstream now, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, I won't say fully, but it's definitely more acceptable,
Right.
Like I've done 4 programs with Dr. Daniel Amen.
Mm-hmm.
It was, a pioneer in the field of neuro science and research, and has it was really supportive of music and how it could be utilized. And it was part of a #1 PBS special called Memory Rescue, and utilizing music as one of the tools that can help prevent us from moving into some of those chronic illnesses by utilizing it every day to manage stress, anxiety, and sleep. And, those are the 3 big ones that show up in chronic and terminal illness. They're precursors for pretty much every type of physical challenge that we have. So when you look at it that way, it is really moving into mainstream. And yeah, I call it, instead of new age, I call it now age, because we really
Right.
have to jump into the fact that this is, it's a powerful switch in mindset
Extremely powerful.
to at least consider it. And even in, again, things that people would consider woo or new age, things like a drumming circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're utilizing drums. There are studies that were put out by Remo is the people who make drum skins for, drum kits and also percussion. They found that people at PTSD and vets who, had chronic anxiety or chronic PTSD, were able to actually alter anxiety levels and increase their alpha brainwave states by 40% in one drumming session. And again, what's the drum? The drum is a metronome. The drum connects us to our heart. The drum allows us to move into a trance state, where what's happening in a trance state, again, something that's like, oh, that sounds crazy, moving into a trance state. But what's happening in a trance state is we're releasing our inner dialogue. And the same thing when you're chanting, it's hard to be thinking about your, your sister who just hurt your feelings, or, a patient that wrote a nasty email, so those inner thoughts that go around and around in our heads that create the stress wheel of going round and round, those are interrupted by things like chanting and drumming, things that are repetitive, where we have to bring our focus and awareness on something repetitive, like hitting a drum beat once every beat,
Mm-hmm.
for the next 15 minutes, or chanting Om, the same thing. You have to focus and bring your awareness someplace else. And that's really what it's about, what they knew thousands of years ago that we still know today,
Right.
right? Is we're spending way too much time thinking.
Right.
And, moving out of that thinking mind and allowing it to rest is one of the most powerful things that we can do for ourselves to improve our health and increase our energy and navigate our own energy,
I'm
where
just
other people are not.
I'm giggling because my memories of drum circles come back from the Grateful Dead concerts when I was as a teenager in high school.
There you go.
Back then, it was just all the hippies sitting around with their dreadlocks beating on the drums. I actually bought this beautiful drum that I still have in my home, but it's so fun to see now that it's a fairly well accepted practice that people are incorporating into their health and wellness routines and expansive routines.
Yeah, and we're seeing it in ways that are not as, what would be considered woo or stretching. We're
Right.
seeing it as well, like in Parkinson's patients, where the motor centers are affected in the basal ganglia, which, controls some of our motor control. People can have a gait, a challenge, they're finding their rhythm when they're walking. So they find that when you utilize specific music for that, like their big band music or things where they can really just walk on the beat, that they could actually improve their gait. People who have strokes, who have aphasia, who have to relearn language, are learning it by what's called melodic intonation. So that is when you're utilizing songs like Happy Birthday or nursery rhymes, that they can't say happy birthday even, but they can sing it. So they start to sing sentences in the same melodies as these nursery rhymes that they remembered, right? Music creates these autobiographical memories where it's so wired into our brain that can create new, new ways to map
A new pathway.
thoughts. So neuroplasticity and music are moving more into studies we're seeing in Alzheimer's as well,
Yeah, I
where,
read that.
people are using their favorite playlist of people with their parents who, their parents' favorite playlist, who before they had the disease, they loved listening to those songs, and they're experiencing awakenings and more ability to connect with memories. So, it's really amazing what we're seeing in research
Is
come
that
forward.
I love it. Yeah, and I'll obviously link to your book at the end. It's absolutely amazing. I would highly recommend to everyone. And he has links to a bunch of songs. He has all of the medical evidence. He has so much in there. It is definitely worth a read. I have two more things I want to talk about if we can get
Oh,
to both of
yeah,
them.
whatever
Um,
you like.
One is chakras or energetic centers and how that plays into coherence and the vibration status or expansiveness. And then what I really want to talk about is your creative process. And that is because I really do think that everyone is a creator of some type. And I think people just don't know how to listen in to do their creative work. So I would love to talk about your creative process and how you get there.
Okay, and again, like chakras are energy centers. Um, you know, been around for thousands of years. This is not something that I'm inventing, but it's basically a system that helps us bring awareness to emotions. I say people, places, things, situation, events, and energy happen in our day. And just as we talked about that, certain challenges in your day, something, a challenge in your life that you might have a hard time um, understanding, right? Or it's bringing stress into your day, can create digestive problems, right? For you, for people. So is it possible, that would be the question I would ask, is it possible that certain emotions are held in different places in our physical body and that intertwines with these energy centers that basically help us move that energy in some way? And that is the belief that, goes back, that each of these centers has a specific emotion or energy that it works with in terms of moving the energy or holding on to the energy.
And then creating physical disease,
That's
right?
right. So
Yeah.
they all are associated with different areas. So like that center we're talking about would be the sacral chakra that is in that stomach area. And it's usually geared towards things that happen in our relationships. So anytime that we're experiencing a challenge in relationships that are geared towards maybe we're stomaching it or putting up with someone in our lives. I'm having a hard time digesting that situation. Is it possible that energy might get stuck in that area? Another center, say the throat center.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever experienced, not being heard, acknowledged, or appreciated? Someone at work, my boss never listens to me, or my mom and dad just, I never feel like I'm heard. Has anyone ever experienced having a scratchy throat or a sore throat after not being able to voice themselves? And same thing with our hearts, in terms, that's the energy of giving and receiving of love. But also, if we're holding on to bitterness or resentment, or how do you explain, I forget what they call it. You'll probably know this. My wife knows this. Again, my wife is a medical doctor as well. She's a naturopathic medical doctor. The phenomenon of a spouse that passes and the wife or husband passes very shortly after that because the hearts are so connected. There's a medical phenomenon around that, and I'm not sure what it's called.
I can't think of the name right now.
Okay, I'll have to ask.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask her. But
Right.
It's all based on this chakra system actually gets to process energy. Just like we digest food, we can digest emotions and things that come into our day. And just like our digestive system, we don't have to give directions to how our body's going to digest foods. Right? We don't have to say, okay, I'm going to chew you now. We're going to break down in my mouth with certain enzymes, and then you're going to go down my esophagus, and then we'll further break down until we move that energy, right, of food into getting some nutrition from it, and then taking what we don't need and removing it, right? So think about that exact same process for digesting emotions. When a situation happens that can be viewed as a negative situation, right? We digest it in a certain way. We take what nutrition we can. Sometimes we learn the lesson, sometimes we don't. We get rid of what we don't need, but sometimes we hold on to that in terms of bitterness or resentment. And the other way around as well. When we experience a happy experience, we take what we need from it and we digest it, and we get what we need from that lesson. And it works the same way with the energy centers. And each of these energetic plexuses interact with our physical body. They interact with different glands, different hormones. I go deeply into that in the book. And they're starting to show more research around these centers, that there's actually different vibrations in each one, and they're actually measuring it, where people thought there was actually no proof for that. There's no proof because there's no studies.
Right. And I love in your book how you actually guide people through a practice of I don't know if you call it opening the energy centers or clearing them, but you give a very almost easy way of opening them or working on them, which I love. I can't wait to try it. I have not tried it yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's all geared towards resonance, right? So when we find a tone that resonates with another tone, then it amplifies that specific frequency. And so if there was something we were holding in our body and we could find the tone for that, and would it be possible that we could actually clear that energy? And I've done it, myself when I've had oral surgery. I've helped, I've assisted myself in alleviating pain with it. And, notice that I'm always saying, would it be possible that, because again, it's being open to the possibility of all these things. If we start from that place of curiosity, and just say, well, what do I have to lose? It's, it's not going to cost me anything to tone into an area where I'm experiencing pain, or it's not going to cost me that much. If I have a $10 membership on Spotify to listen to music at night to calm me down, right? If we start from that principle, then we try a lot more things and find a lot more ways that we can work with healing and transforming ourselves.
So I want to talk about your creative process, and then I want to end. You said you have your piano with you, so I
I
did not know
do. Yep.
what's happening. So I'm so super excited. Um, one of the quotes in your book was regarding when you had the dream while you were reading Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversations with God. And you said, up until that dream, I thought that I wrote my own songs.
Hmm.
So tell me about that,
Okay.
if you don't
Sure.
mind.
So again, if we start from the premise that everything is energy, and that within our physical body we have a limited amount of energy, but what if we had access to a more infinite energy outside of ourselves as well? A field of all possibilities, and it starts getting into quantum theories and a lot of other things that are, would be another whole interview and going down a rabbit hole with it.
Right.
But starting from the premise that we have the ability to connect with something beyond ourselves. Now, you can call that the universe. You can call that a cosmic connection. You can call it Christ consciousness. You can
Uh-huh.
call it God. You
Uh-huh.
can call it nature. I don't prescribe any which way or any one thing to call it. But I just know that when I was having these experiences, where I was moving into these meditative states with my music, and that experience I shared in the book was I literally received a song, and I say received it because it was in my sleep in a dream
Mm-hmm.
where I woke up with all the words and all the melodies, had to write them all down on a piece of paper and leave a recording for it to myself. At the time, we didn't have as much technology,
Right.
right? So I wouldn't forget the melodies, but literally, the whole song came to me in a dream. So how do we explain things like that? I didn't generate it. I was in a subconscious state of being. So if we can move into these states, what other things are possible that we are connecting to, and so that, again, I won't say that's random, but it's similar in a way that was received. What would happen if I directed my energy towards that? And that's really what happened to me. It said, wow, if this came to me in a dream, is it possible that that's what I've been connecting to? Or what would happen if I set an intention every time that I wrote a piece of music, that I was connecting to something beyond myself, that I was collaborating with something beyond myself? I might have a limited amount of ideas in my head, but if I was connecting to this vast field,
Right.
there's got to be more ideas than I just have, as a person with limited experiences. And that's what I started to do. I started to invite that source of energy into my collaborative process. And, that's what I do all the time now. So even if I'm going to play you a piece of music that, that I'm going to play you, it's not anything that I've come prepared to do. It's just something that I allow to let flow and move into flow state, and again, we have the ability to guide our creative energy. And ultimately for me, that's really why I wrote the book, Lynn. I definitely wanted to provide research, and I definitely wanted to talk more and bridge more with the medical community. But I think ultimately it's what are we navigating our energy for? And that's really what it comes down to. Great. I had more energy today. Wow, I slept better. Now what?
Right.
I'm just going to work 20 more hours, right? I mean, the whole thing about longevity, even for me, and it's a great topic, and we're all talking about longevity. But longevity without purpose, what does it equal? I mean,
Right.
if we're just going to live, we want to live another 20 years so we could complain for another 20 years,
Right. Or
right?
retirement vault or yeah.
Right. What good is it, right? But
Right.
if we are creating we're navigating our energy, and we want to live longer because it's called dharma. We have purpose that we want to share.
Mm-hmm.
I have bodies of work that I like to be around to share more of when I'm in an elder state. So that for me is a lot of what this is for. If we could free up our energy and not spend as much doing things that don't bring us joy, right? Or things that move us into an incoherent state, or things that are creating stress, then it opens up more time to be creative in our lives and to share our mission and legacy, whatever that is. And I'm sure, a lot of people who are watching, maybe this is at a perfect time in your career that you're listening to this. Are you still connected to why you started, right? To your mission, to your legacy? Why did you start this? Because if we lose sight of, and sometimes that changes, why we started is not why we're
For
doing
sure.
it now, but you want it to be something that you're guiding, not something that has kind of, like, this is where we started our interview, was with my experiment, right? Where I lost my why, like why I was doing music. All I knew, I had to belt out another song by the end of this month, right? Or the end of this week. And, I had enough awareness to bring myself back and say, wow, this was not the kid who sat at the edge of his bed, loving the compositional process. And you know what? Steer it back. Find a way to steer it back to your heart. When we talk about being heart-centered, that's what it is. Our heart is in our center. So it's steering it back, to your vision and your mission. And that's all in our heart's intelligence, that heart coherence. That's one of the benefits when you're in these coherent states, that you start to listen to your intuitive self as well. And you start to have this conversation, and we call it, in regular society, oh, I followed my gut.
Right.
I followed my gut. And that's really what it is. You follow your gut when you're listening to your inner voice. And that inner voice of wisdom is not always coming from the mind. It's coming from the heart.
Right. Well, and I loved how you said it's when your mind's intelligence and your heart's intelligence is also connected to the intelligence outside of yourself. That's like the sweet spot.
That's the sweet spot, your heartbeat and this other heartbeat of the universe. And then, your mind too is your imprint. It's everything that you've learned, in your life. So you can't just disassociate that. It's important, all the knowledge that you've obtained and all the things that you know and have learned for a particular reason. I'm not saying to throw that out. No, it's integrating it. And that's, where it's getting exciting now. And in, your field as well, is the combination of these two. We're starting to study neurocardiology. We're looking at the effects of everything that we're talking about, and how the heart's intelligence and the brain's intelligence are connected. When we're in these coherent states, that our brain is producing more alpha brainwaves. How do we explain that? There's a connection.
Right. Okay, so I want to share with the audience that I will be posting a lot of information below this episode. So in his book, he has specific processes you can do. There was now I'm forgetting. The sigh, the heart song breathing process. So there's these super, super easy things you can do just to start tipping your toes into what he's talking about. There's also instructions on how to curate these playlists that you play morning, noon, night, how you can start to curate these playlists that will help to put yourself into better coherence and vibrational state. And then you offered to actually provide us with an example of your music or share with us some of your music. And I would love to hear that right now.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do this live. So for those of you who say, well, where can I get that? You can't get this exact piece, but there are similar pieces to it. And there are also, for those of you, who are like, well, I know myself, I'm not going to create a playlist, or I don't know where to begin. If you are a Spotify member, or, you have YouTube, I have some videos, but more on Spotify. I have a playlist for sleep. I have playlists for starting your day. I have playlists for gratitude, so it's very easy to access.
I just have to share that. So yesterday I was, I have two big dogs and they're really wild in the morning. And I was, kind of loosely preparing for today. And so I went on your Spotify, and you have one for dogs, right?
I do. So yeah, I just released that on Spotify. And a lot of the studies show that what we're finding for humans have similar effects on animals.
Well, they were passed out for about a half an hour.
Well, I want a video next time you try
to me, laying right next to me, just my wild puppy was just like passed out. It was amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. So I composed that for my rescue when we had him. He's passed since then, but we used it as well to help him pass more peacefully. and it's called Pet Waves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about the human connection of listening to the music together,
Mm-hmm.
because our animals pick up on our stress. And they've done some studies on that as well that show that our cortisol levels, which, as you know, is one of our stress hormones, run in conjunction with our pets. So they
Not
produce
surprising.
more cortisol when we're under stress.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with heart coherence. They sync to our state when we're stressed. They're stressed as well. So if you can move to a place of moving into relaxation with them, it creates a bond with them when you're there. And so we would do that with our dog. We'd play the music for him. And then when we left the house, we'd play it for him.
Mm-hmm.
So he started to associate being loved with the music, and he got over a lot of abandonment issues.
I love
with
it.
So
I love it. Okay, so
awesome.
yeah,
So
so
yeah, I will turn around
okay,
and I will play. It might take me a second there, but
sounds
so
good.
what I'm going to do is just allow a piece of music to come through, and it's
Okay.
really, I think of it as a gift, to myself as well, because it allows me to calm down. So anyone, if you're listening there and you're experiencing any stress in your day, take it as a time to just close your eyes and receive for yourself. If you want to create an intention for yourself, that's fine. If you just want to receive and relax, you can do that also. And just allow yourself to move into a more peaceful state. So I always suggest closing your eyes to do that, because as soon as we close our eyes, we're slowing our brain waves down. And just start to slow your breathing down. Sometimes I place my hands on my heart. That helps me as well. But do what feels comfortable for you. And just close your eyes and go inwards.
Okay, I'm gonna do it. Barry Goldstein. That was incredible.
Thank you.
Amazing. I have to say, I was a little vulnerable to sit there with my eyes closed, but I liked it. It was a
Yeah, and
good,
just give yourself a big breath in.
yeah.
Big breath in and
I'm
just
a-
release that breath.
And what I would like to say is he has so many good tracks on Spotify. It's endless. So it's easy. You go to Spotify, search up Barry Goldstein, and you can explore everything he has to offer there. Check him out on YouTube. He has a website. His book, like I said, I highly, highly recommend it. I will read it again and again. It was my second time through today as I was preparing for the talk tonight. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me because it's a little selfish. This is equally exciting for me as it was for my audience, and I am so grateful that other people get to hear it as well.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for helping to get this out there in terms of music as medicine. So that's
Music is
greatly
medicine.
appreciated.
Awesome.
And
Awesome. Well, I look forward to connecting again, and I'm going to be hopefully talking to your wife in the near future as well. So I'll ask her more about your peanut butter, your what do you call it, the peanut butter relationship you have now, peanut butter cup relationship, I think.
yeah, she got her medicine in my music, and I got my music in her medicine.
Yeah, so that will be
It's
for
like
another
Reese's peanut butter.
episode, but I can't wait to
There
talk
you
more
go.
about that. Awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate it.